Today's video is brought to you by Ridge. Stick around to learn more about their awesome wallets in just a bit. Lost Ark has been released in the West, and millions of players have had their first taste of the game. Some have pushed progression, while others have opted to take things slow. It's a great game, but it's not perfect, and that's what we're here to talk about today. Hey there friends, it's Codiak here. Welcome back to Legacy Gaming. Today, we're breaking down some big changes that could have a huge positive impact on Lost Ark. Now, anytime I do one of these videos, I like to make it abundantly clear that this is a subjective topic. You're not going to agree with everything I say. You might not even agree with most of it, and that's fine. You can tell me about it in the comments. I love Lost Ark, I really do, and I think it's got a ton of promise, but that being said, there's plenty about the game that needs some serious attention, and that's what I want to unpack in this video. I couldn't start this video without talking about guilds. As one of the largest guilds in North America, I have to tell you guys, the entire process has been a headache from the start, and that's all because of the design of the guilds within the game. Guild caps add nothing of value to the community experience within Lost Ark. I'd argue that this is actually one of the least social MMOs at this point for a number of different reasons, the cap being one of them. When the game launched, we had over 6,000 members wanting to be part of our community, but because of the sheer amount of time and effort it took to organize things, we could only launch with 25 guilds, each with a 30 roster limitation. Well, the process of leveling up a guild takes an insane amount of time, so by the time we do get to a 100-man roster, most of those people will have moved on, and I don't blame them. For those that don't know, Guild vs. Guild and Guild vs. Environment content is coming down the line, and that's the only logical reason why the caps exist in the first place. The more people under one umbrella, the better the community experience within the game. It's that simple. As of right now, we're using Discord to stay connected because there are no other easy ways to engage across guilds within the game, and that's a huge issue in my opinion. With the Loa on Winter presentation from last year still relatively fresh in my mind, I have to think that with more emphasis on horizontal content, guilds have to be part of that equation. On top of removing the caps entirely, there's also a strange lack of functionality within the guilds. There's no bank, and whether you love or hate that idea, being able to share resources with the community is one way to bring people together. There's also no hub system outside of your stronghold. It seems obvious, especially in a game as dense as Lost Ark, that you'd make it possible for your entire guild to be together in one place at one time, a stronghold-like system designed just for guilds. I also think the cooldowns associated with guilds is bizarre beyond belief. Why someone joining a guild has a 3-day cooldown to contribute to the guild quest is an unnecessary barrier to engagement. Top to bottom, there are just things missing or off about the guild system within the game, and once that GVG and GVE content becomes a thing, I think people are going to realize that a more robust system is needed. MMOs are social games, that's in their DNA, so why are there so many roadblocks to that experience in Lost Ark? I'm not entirely sure, but I definitely believe some changes need to be made. There's a fair number of us in the Legacy gaming community that enjoy chopping down trees or searching for runes, but right now, as it currently stands, the gathering crafting loop within the game is just not that engaging. While not the perfect example, I think back to New World and my time with that game. What was the one thing people talked about more than anything else, especially at the start? The gathering and crafting loop, and how it really felt like a meaningful part of the experience. That's what's missing from Lost Ark, and something that I believe really needs a hard look at. What I do like is the leveling system. I feel like I'm constantly progressing no matter what I'm doing, but there's really nothing else that's satisfying about the entire experience. The items I collect go into a separate tab that I barely ever look at, and the lack of diversity really makes it apparent that it's busy work. That's it. Like I said, I do think they're onto something with the life skill leveling system and the various augmentations and perks that come with that, but if they want to entice players to engage in this system day in and day out, they need to go back to the drawing boards. On the crafting side of things, it's not much better. I've come around a bit on the stronghold, but the crafting, more than anything else in the game, makes Lost Ark feel like a mobile experience amped up for PC. I'm sorry, but I just don't want to queue up a million potions and watch timers tick down as I make various consumables. That's a cheap experience that doesn't engage me in any way. I realize these items are valuable, we've talked about that before, but there's gotta be something more here. I want a reason to engage in life skills outside of collecting World Tree leaves and completing my guild quests, and I think the team is capable of doing that, but it requires a bit of an overhaul. Today's video is brought to you by the Ridge. Now, I've been using my Ridge wallet for a few years now, long before they were ever interested in sponsoring a few videos. The reason why? Simplicity. I had a classic big bulky wallet that I hated, but could never find a solution that worked for me. Long story short, I bit the bullet, tried something completely new, and that, my friends, is the Ridge wallet. 12 cards, a money clip that keeps your bills nice and snug, and designs that actually look cool. I've been rocking the carbon fiber since day one, but if you're looking for something a bit flashier, they've got that too. Guys, if you're looking to change up your wallet game, check out Ridge Wallets and use the code LEGACY at checkout. That'll save you 15%, and we'll let our friends at the Ridge know we sent you. I think we can all agree we saw the bot gold farming issue coming from a mile away, and if you didn't, you clearly haven't played any free MMOs before. Here's the thing. Gold spam sucks. No one wants to deal with it, and right now it's a huge problem within the game. The chat system and design isn't great to begin with, but now players have to contend with spam non-stop from the second they arrive at any hub within the game. Also, don't even get us started with the sheer amount of Berserker and Sorceress bots running through the world, farming in a very obvious bot loop. Livid even spent about an hour disrupting the bot's farm and reported every single one that came through his way. Reporting bots is part of the solution, one every player should actively be a part of, but this is an issue far greater. To honestly fix the bot spam issue, the team will need to beef up their tools for dealing with these spams and scams. It's a free MMO, which means finding a way to restrict unlimited account creation is the key to at least stemming the tide. You can rely on players to report these bots all you want, but at the end of the day, the root of the issue has to be addressed, which it should, as soon as possible. Rox, the community manager, has stated that over 1 million illegitimate accounts were removed. This is within the first month of launch here in the West, but that's hardly seemed to make a dent in the issue. This next one is a little cerebral, but bear with me. I don't know about you guys, but Livid and I both feel we have no real connection with our characters. Now, this is a common problem in third-person games because you're above them, not behind them, but the added factor here is the looting within the game. We're collecting tokens, that's it. We're not hunting for pieces of gear. I couldn't tell you the name of a single weapon or armor piece I've collected, and that's a huge miss in my opinion. I think for most people, and maybe that's a gross assumption, like the idea that our characters in MMOs are extensions of ourselves to a certain degree, and part of that identity building process is the way we look within the world. I think back to my time with World of Warcraft and how each piece of gear, the memorable ones, made me feel like I had accomplished something. The first time I put on that T2 Judgment Paladin set, it was fulfilling. I haven't had that same experience in Lost Ark, and that's because I'm just collecting tokens. I think this issue goes deeper than just gearing. It's interconnected with the honing and upgrading systems within the game. The idea is that you don't hold on to any one piece of gear for very long before it's tossed aside. Chaos Dungeons award one set that quickly get replaced with Abyssal Dungeon sets, which ultimately get replaced at the next tier. Weapons don't even factor in because they're just another token you're collecting, and that one piece of loot you do get from Abyssal Dungeons is coupled with, you guessed it, more tokens you use to craft, and I use that word loosely, the rest of the set. Bottom line, it's just not fulfilling, and it's part of the rigmarole associated with the vertical progression within Lost Ark, and it doesn't have to be this way. There are opportunities to create a gearing system that players want to invest in, but as it currently stands, it's just not in the cards. This is one of the things on the list I doubt will change ever, because the systems I'm talking about revamping are so deeply ingrained in the game, it would take a massive effort to untangle and then redesign them. That being said, I think there is a solution to make a more robust transmog system that catalogs and allows players to change their visual appearance based on any gear they've already collected without the need to actually hold on to the items. Bags are already filled to the brim with tokens and currencies, so it's an easier fix to just give players the flexibility, with no strings attached, to look the way that they want without having to spend money on store cosmetics. Alright, hopefully this next one won't be too controversial, but I believe, and I'm sure many others believe this too, that we need more information when it comes to performance in group content. Look, I get it, some people think damage meters are the worst, and I can understand why, but if you're in a guild setting pushing progression, you need tools to help identify issues on your team. Lost Ark's hardest content is largely about personal responsibility, but that doesn't mean it strips away the importance of knowing how much damage someone else is doing in comparison to someone else, or how much damage a person is taking to avoidable sources. Information is key to progression groups, but as it stands right now, that information is only available when in the testing mode in Trixian. What I will say is this: I understand meters could completely dissuade a casual player from engaging in group content, mainly because the fear of being chastised for not performing up to some sort of standard. So I think the implementation should be limited, but if a guild group of 8 wants to take on something and they want to test their own performance internally, they should be allowed to do that. There is definitely some gray area here, especially when it comes to trying to figure out the nuances of when and where this will be accessible, but I think it's a much needed tool that's missing from the game. Another tool or feature, whatever you want to call it, missing from Lost Ark is the ability to move around elements of your UI. Modular interfaces are just better in every way, shape, and form because players can build their screen the way that they want. Right now, these options are incredibly limited, and with the amount of stuff that populates your screen, I'm looking at you, Chaos Dungeons, it's just something that could be avoided. We already know that things like movable loot windows are on the team's radar, but why stop there? Let players move their mini-maps, their quest logs, their action bars, damn near everything they want, because that's ultimately going to make the experience better for the end user. There's no downside here, just some additional work that needs to happen from the developer side of things. If they have the resources, this seems like a no-brainer, but again, that's just my opinion. In the same vein is opening up the API to allow for mod access. Look, the golden age of MMOs gave us some of the best game enhancement tools out there. There are incredible people that know how to make incredibly useful or cool tools, and that's something that could really help Lost Ark. I get the issue. Opening up the game for modded content is a risky proposition that has to be considered and executed carefully for a number of reasons. But think of all the cool things players could add into the game if given the chance. As we just mentioned, a total overhaul to the UI system would be a game changer. Themed layouts based on classes, just a reorg of the existing tools, the sky is honestly the limit. This even goes back to the damage meters discussion. If the team doesn't want to spend the resources to create a tool like that, let someone else do it for the low cost of free. Again, I understand there are some moral conundrums to consider, but I think there are far more benefits than drawbacks. Part of the challenge here is where to host these mods, right? I remember using Curse back in the day, but in terms of Lost Ark, there aren't services like that for Western players, at least not yet. Again, you give the people the keys to the castle and they'll do some pretty awesome things, but it's an issue the developers need to consider carefully. For a game that puts so much stock on alts, it's pretty funny how limited the interactions across the roster can actually be. This really boils down to your inventory and the lack of flexibility between characters. Maybe it's a step too far, but why limit resources per character? What's the point? As many of you have probably experienced, you're going to sit on a stack of T1 or T2 resources that could be used to improve your ult, but instead sit idle in your bags or become trash because there's no functional way to make them accessible on another character because of the bounded restrictions. The same could be said for certain battle items. Why restrict them? It just doesn't make sense. I spent the time to collect or craft the item, why restrict who gets to use it? This is definitely something that should be looked at again, especially if the team wants alts to continue to be a big part of the vertical progression process. Of course, there are things that are already shared across your roster, and that's great, but let's open that up to alts even more. I think it's honestly a win across the board. As we saw at launch, there are some things not in place within the game that really need to be there. For example, a character transfer system. I'm sure no developer goes into a massive rollout expecting to have server issues, but they should at least have some sort of blueprint for how to alleviate the struggles after the fact. Right now, there is no character transfer system in the game, which means where you made your character is most likely where you'll stay. This issue isn't helped by the fact that we're just given 2 power passes right out of the gate. So we're not just talking about one character, but a minimum of 3 that are pretty much stuck in place. This still happens to us all the time. People wanting to join the guild, but not being on the same server. There's just no option or recourse other than re-rolling, and that just kind of sucks. As I said before, there are actually a lot of small things that isolate players in this game, and as an MMO, it should be the opposite. The game shouldn't get in the way of people connecting and being social. Now, this is something the Amazon team has addressed multiple times, and it could just be a regional thing. We're used to character transfer systems over here in the West, but perhaps in Korea it's not really necessary or people don't care, so I understand it to a degree, but I think it should be a top priority moving forward. The only real saving grace is that servers within a region are connected content-wise, so there should be no dead servers when it comes to grouping up to take on things like Chaos Dungeons and Guardian raids. But again, I go back to the guild issue and the numerous problems that system has. The lack of character transfers is just another piece to that puzzle. If I'm being real with you guys, it is another way for the team to make some money. We've seen paid character transfers in nearly every Western MMO, so not having that system just seems a bit weird. The player gets to move where they want to go, and the developers make some coin for offering that service. While Livid and I love making dungeon and raid guides, that's a band-aid for a bigger issue. Design that doesn't teach the player what to do. Good boss mechanics shouldn't be a mystery to a player. That's a cheap way to artificially enhance the difficulty of a fight. Instead, the design should be challenging because it's hard to execute, but the mechanic itself should teach the player what to do. If the mechanic simply exists without any context, then people will have to rely on other sources for information. Now, to be clear, I personally haven't progressed to the endgame content that many of the Korean players have experienced. Remember, at this point, they're still much further ahead than the NAEU. But from what I can tell, the rating has become more refined and the design much tighter. That would make sense that the lessons from earlier in development would inform the newer content, but I just can't be sure at this point. One thing I see from a lot of people in the comment section is the disdain for one-shot mechanics, and I kind of understand that to a degree. I like multi-layered boss fights that spiral out of control, not fights that just go from everyone alive to everyone dead, because in my mind that makes a lot less sense. In an ideal world, you start to lose grip of the mechanics and it's a slow burn to failure, whereas in many Lost Ark encounters, you don't meet a stagger check, well, everyone simply dies and you start over. But here again, we have some disagreement, because Livid doesn't actually mind this, but then again, he's a glutton for punishment and enjoy bosses that can potentially kill you outright. I think a vast majority of it comes back to personal responsibility and the emphasis the game puts on the individual to perform. Again, haven't done the cutting edge stuff, but I would love to see more team-wide engagement that really challenges the group to work together to overcome an obstacle. I would imagine this is going to get better with every new content drop. The team will get more experience, learn what players like and don't like, and the group dungeons and raids will continue to get better. I should point to Argos, now that he's coming to the West, as a pivot point, because a lot of players that experience the game on the Korean side of things say that that boss, Argos, is where the endgame PvE truly came into its own. We'll see if that rings true for the Western audience, but it is promising. This is really less about change and more about a continued emphasis on improving the PvE process to make more engaging boss fights that not only challenge the player, but teach them the mechanics in order to be successful. I wanted to end with a sort of silly one, but something that came up numerous times in our discussion and has popped up all over the internet: stealth missions. I get the team is trying to change it up, but man did they miss the mark. The issue here is simple. As soon as you're caught, the entire scenario restarts, and there's no real flexibility to save yourself from a mistake. It slows the Lost Ark experience to a grinding halt, and that in and of itself is just jarring. There's even a simple fix here: add some checkpoints so that there's some progression, but that's a cheap fix for a larger issue. Do we need stealth missions? Not really. They don't add much to the experience, but if you do want to keep them, maybe just tweak them a bit to be less of an annoyance. When all is said and done, there are a lot of things I love about Lost Ark. The game clearly works on multiple levels, and that's the reason for its absolutely massive following here in the West. Whether or not the game survives long term, well, that's another story entirely. Maintaining a hungry MMO audience is a balancing act, one countless games have tried and failed to do, so will Lost Ark be any different? I'll let you guys decide. We've had some great discussions in our Discord about these topics, so if you want to join one of the largest Lost Ark communities in North America, feel free to join us by using the link below. Of course, if you like our Lost Ark content, you already know what to do. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and in this case, leave us a comment. Let us know what one thing you would change about Lost Ark. Finally, if you like everything we're doing here on the channel and you want to help us out even more, you can do so by becoming a member. For just a couple bucks, you're helping Livid and I achieve our dreams of becoming full-time content creators. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.